Hey, Courtney. Y'all got Easter baskets? Got this candy in my mouth. Courtney. 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 Hey. What you doing, Courtney? Yeah, whatever that is. What's that, a top?
This is Courtney's first Easter. You got the top. Yeah. Think of Easter bunny.
Hey.
Easter bunny.
I want to see a girl that
Say, look. I'm beautiful. Say, yeah. Say, get my dress. Get out the bed. You got some out. Say, look. Look at your daddy. Look at your daddy.
kcisthetown.com. This is a story about Corey Webb from Kansas City. Marquita Harrison met the father of her children in high school. He was a few years older than her. They had the same record-keeping class. Big Corey stood 6 feet tall, slim, but muscular built and very athletic. He was very quiet, but socially able. Big Corey wouldn't spark up a conversation unless spoken to. He would always be in trouble for fighting at the school games over basketball, amongst other things. He lived for basketball, but he struggled with school. Marquita was afraid of boys, but not him. Big Corey never tried to force Marquita into anything, and he never made her feel like a piece of meat. He would pass her in the halls, and he would always ask her if she wanted candy just to get her attention. Big Corey had a car as well, and he would give Marquita and her cousin a ride home from school. Her cousin was more outgoing and sure of herself. She would flirt with him and ask him if she could drive. He seemed to be a little uncomfortable with her advances, which was very different from most boys. Her cousin was very pretty. Marquita was quiet and didn't say much of anything until one day they had a mutual friend that let her know he was interested in her. They spoke on the phone every day, all night, and hit it off very well. Big Corey lived with his mom. His dad died when he was 5 years old from an illness. Marquita was raised by her aunt for 8 years and recently had moved back with her mother at 15 years old. Marquita and Big Corey came from broken families and were personally dealing with their own teenage crisis. Marquita would sneak off to his house every chance she could so they could find peace with each other. He was very loving to Marquita in the beginning. No matter where she was, he would come. She was over her cousin's house one day and he stopped by. Marquita was watching Little Mermaid and he watched it with her with no complaints. What 18-year-old do you know would sit there and watch a love story cartoon? Marquita got into her first fight with Big Corey, and guess what? You guessed it. She found out she was pregnant about a week later. She was 16 years old and pregnant. She was 1 week shy from being 17 years old before having her first and only son, Corey. By the time 9 months had passed, Marquita and Corey's father had argued so much, but they continued to stay together. When it was good, it was good. But when it was bad, it was violent and scary. Marquita had a hard time being a pregnant teenager. She had to watch all of her friends have freedom, but she couldn't. Also, she didn't like the way her peers and elders judged her. Little Corey was born September the 30th, 1993. He weighed 7.5 ounces, 19 inches long, wavy black hair, and the longest fingers his mother had ever seen. And he had a big head. He looked like an alien. As Marquita was delivering vaginally, his father was watching. Only half of Corey's face was out. He was face up when he just completely opened his eyes. Big Corey almost passed out, and the nurses ran to him saying, "Are you okay, sir?" Marquita's response was, "Hey, I'm the one having the baby," in a funny, sarcastic manner. She never forgot how Big Corey looked at his son when he held him in his arms. Marquita never really questioned his love for her, but she never had a question nor a doubt of how happy he was to have his son. She felt proud at that moment since she gave him what he wanted. He would be happy for now, and they would get along. They both graduated and had to become adults very quickly. At 17 years old, the couple got a place together. Their son was being raised, basically, by teenagers, and little Corey was quite advanced in certain areas. He could read big sentences by 3 years old, make his own cereal or whatever reasonably out of the kitchen that was edible. Lil Corey played basketball, of course, and could spin the ball off his finger at 5 years old. Basketball, baseball, modeling, karate, and Golden Gloves were his curricula as he grew up. He loved art and could draw quite well. The school had his artwork on the billboard in our city from the school he went to. He also likes to do magic. Lil Corey would do tricks with decks of cards he carried around, as well as he could do the illusion of levitation. He loved David Blaine. I noticed he was very neat. Unlike his sister, everything had to be neat. His room, clothes, and shoes. He had a modeling job with Hallmark at 5 years old, but he lost the job as soon as he was hired. His job included holding a rabbit for his picture. He refused and acted a complete fool every time the rabbit was close to his proximity. He was good at basketball, but not like his father. His father loved the sport, and Corey just liked it due to his dad liking it. Corey was extremely good at baseball and seemed to take to it very well. He never cared for football too much. Lil Corey was a daddy's boy. He often bumped heads with his mother because they were a lot alike. Also, his dad was not the disciplinary. His mother was. Marquita worked a lot, and his dad spent a lot of time with him, teaching him how to ride a bike, spin the ball on his little finger, wrestling with him, and playing video games. Not to say his father never worked, but he just wasn't consistent with it. His mother's role mostly consists of working and cooking, but she loved to interact with her kids with creativity, making things, seeing new things, or just introducing them to things she was never able to do or have as a child. Marquita was more the provider, and his dad was more the nurturer. Marquita was raised that way. Her background was tough, but she wasn't a victim in her eyes. On July the 23rd, 2010, Marquita came home from work around 5 p.m., which was a Friday. Her mother stated, "Is Corey with you?" Marquita stated, "No, I was at work." Her mother advised her that she went into Corey's room after she realized he was asleep for a long period of time. At that time, she noticed it was not him under the cover, but pillows. Marquita immediately ran upstairs and noticed her son's clothes, shoes, and contact lenses and accessories were gone. She then called his girlfriend's house, which had recently moved out of state to Tyler, Texas. Her mother answered the phone, and Marquita asked to speak to her daughter. She claimed her daughter was in Waco, Texas, with relatives. Marquita started to yell and scream at her out of anger and frustration because she seemed to be hesitant with her questions. She was sick of her daughter's influence over her son. Marquita advised her if her daughter did not call her back that she was sending the police to her house for harboring a minor. Then she hung up. Marquita jumped in her car and headed to the Greyhound bus station in the town of Kansas City. She spoke with the woman at the front desk and begged her to tell her if her child got on a bus headed to Tyler, Texas. She said she would not be able to help her because of privacy laws. Marquita advised her that her child is 16 years old without permission to ride the bus. "I'm scared that he is on it. I will never see him again. I have no address to where he is going," she stated. She could see the worry in Marquita's eyes and asked his name. She said Corey. His name is Corey Webb, and he is 16 years old. She said, "How do I know you are the mother?" Marquita stated that she didn't have the same last name as her son, but she has his sister, Courtney Webb's social security card with her. She then casually passed Marquita a scheduled bus ticket receipt with her son's info. The bus left at 5 a.m. and was scheduled to be in Texas at around 9:15 p.m. It was close to 6:30 p.m. by the time Marquita got this information. She was crushed for time and contacted his father on what their child had done. Marquita advised him that she was going to call the police to have him picked up at the bus station. Big Corey stated, "I don't think it's a good idea to get the police involved in family issues. It could cause more problems." He has always been suspicious of law enforcement, but at the same time, Marquita didn't have those worries. She has previous experience of working with the police department as well as the detention center and had a strong faith in the law. Marquita told him to stop being so paranoid. She told him they will help us. If we let Corey get off that bus, how will we find him? His father was still not sold on Marquita calling the police, so she decided to make a parental decision by herself. She called the local law enforcement and advised them that her son had run away and he was on the Greyhound close to getting off at the destination. Marquita went to the police station to file a report. They advised her that her son had a pickup warrant for assault at school on a student. She said she didn't know that, but does that mean he will be sent back and held in detention in Missouri and eventually signed over to me. He said yes. She said, well, that's all right with me. I will make him sit there for a couple of days. That will teach him to act like he has some sense. He is not grown, and he will not just be jumping up and leaving when he wants to. The officer contacted the Tyler Police Department to advise them of a runaway juvenile along with a pickup warrant for assault. The officer stated that he had contacted the local authority in that area, and they will be at the bus station at the arrival time to get him off the bus. He then stated he would give Marquita a call when they have her son. Hours had passed since 9 p.m. and she called the police department on different occasions to verify if they had him. She was told the officer is still on standby and they would give her a call. Marquita eventually received a call around 10 p.m. from a female officer, Jessica Dalton, stating that she has little Corey. He will be taken to the detention center until local authorities extradite him back home. Jessica asked his mother if she would like to speak to him, and she said yes. Her son got on the phone, and she asked him when was he gonna let them know he was moving out of state. He started saying, "You kicked me out. I'm your son." Marquita became even more upset because he was manipulating her words. She advised him that she never told him to go to Texas. His mother told him that if he can't follow her rules, he would have to go back to his father's house. She then told him in a mean demeanor, as well as trying to scare him straight, "I hope they kick your ass in jail, and then you will understand." Then she hung up. At around 4 a.m., Marquita received a call from a police officer in Tyler. He started asking her how old was her son. She answered, 16. He said, well, his picture ID has him already at 17 years old and around 4 feet 11 inches tall. She said there was a mistake at the license bureau. Not aware of what he's getting ready to tell her, he then stated, well, your son just shot up the detention center. Marquita was half awake and half asleep, so she said, excuse me? He then repeated himself. She sat straight up and her heart went into her stomach. She just knew his next statement was that her child was dead. Next, he said that her son then turned the gun on himself and threatened to kill himself. The officer kept emphasizing that boy kept asking them to shoot him. The officers were able to talk him down, and he was transported to the hospital with lacerations on his arms due to him cutting it on glass. Corey's mother asked how he got a gun. The officer responded, well, out of his property. She said, excuse me? Where did he get a gun? And how did this happen? He stated the arresting officer never searched his property, and the detention center officer had unsecured property close to your son. And the detention center officer turned his back to get something out of the closet. That's when little Corey allegedly pulled a weapon out of a bag and proceeded to shoot out the glass in jail and escape. He then put the weapon to his head, stating he can't go to jail. He just can't. He would die before he went to jail. After officers talked him down, on the way to the hospital, they claimed her son allegedly kept asking, why didn't you just shoot me? The officer told Marquita that her son will not be coming back home tomorrow because he will be facing charges in Texas. She didn't think much of it at the time and was just wondering where he got a weapon. Marquita started to accuse everyone that lived in her house because she didn't own one. Lil Corey had taken the gun from Marquita's mom's room that lived with her. The reality had not hit her yet that her son was looking at being in prison for up to 99 years. She never had the knowledge that juveniles are certified as adults at the blink of an eye in the small town of Tyler, Texas. The gentle country voice of the police officer that she spoke with sounded concerned and under the impression something must be wrong with her son's mental state. Now this occurred Friday, and by Monday, Lil Corey had his first hearing, which his parents had not made it there for. He was appointed an attorney. He signed papers, but he had no clue what he was signing. He was advised by the judge as well as the attorney that it would be in his best interest. His detention hearing just stated he would not be able to leave the facility due to the charges against him. At the time, Marquita thought it would be shooting in a jail, which is still serious. She remembers the first article she read online. Teenager shoots in detention center and turns gun on himself. Officers talk him out of it. In the article, it stated how the police officer failed to search the juvenile. This caused a wave of questions on the law enforcement security measures, as well as the detention center. In the comments section, Marquita would see a lot of scrutiny from other law enforcement agencies, as well as retired law enforcement and the public. They didn't cut any slack on her son either, but the ones that were seriously in the hot seat with the public was the police department and Smith County Detention. No one could seem to understand how a weapon was able to get past two law enforcement agencies into the juvenile's hands. Some started to question the possibilities as well as their security measures. You had families that were scared that the juveniles in the detention center could have been in danger or may have still been in danger if her son was housed at the juvenile detention center after the incident. New articles from the media then started to read, "Juvenile smuggles weapon in jail and shoots at a public servant." The new articles started to change the public's opinion on Lil Corey's case. The new headlines put Lil Corey straight in the hot seat. As Marquita looked at the comments again, now the public is angry. He is a hoodlum, gang member, gun toter, and he should have been killed where he stood. He is going to jail for life. He wants to do big boy crime, then let him do big boy time. All the anger went right off law enforcement and stayed on her son. His mother spoke with a guy named Jay, which stated he was her son's case manager. He also had a southern voice that didn't seem intimidating. Jay told Marquita Lil Corey would be on suicide watch, and he would be the middleman basically to advise them of court proceedings and the courts of family information. Marquita said, "Tell me something. Which story is it? I was first advised that my son just shot up the jail, but now the news is saying he shot at an officer." He answered, "Well, he did shoot at the officer." Marquita said, Okay, then why wasn't I told that in my initial conversation with the police officer? So, can you please run the story by me again? He stated, well, Tony was getting ready to dress Corey in, and he asked Corey to stand by the closet so he can watch him. Lil Corey then pushed him into the closet, which locked. Lil Corey ran, jumped over the intake counter, and pulled a gun out of his property. At the same time, Tony had already used his key to unlock the closet when he noticed Lil Corey had a gun. He wrestled with Lil Corey and wasn't able to subdue him. And then Lil Corey shot at Tony one time, and he proceeded to run back into the closet to protect himself. Marquita said, "Oh really? So is there a bullet hole there?" Jay answered, "There are bullet holes everywhere." She said, "No. Is there a bullet hole in the closet?" He said yes. She advised him that she would be coming up there that week. A couple of days later, a so-called psychologist named Jim Brown called Marquita, stating that he was counseling her son. She later found out that he is just a social counselor. He asked, did her son have prior suicide attempts or signs of depression? She advised him that he did show depression and that his father and uncle were both in a car accident together last year, which killed his uncle, who he was close to, and fractured his father's neck. Marquita doesn't remember much of their conversation, except Lil Corey being on suicide watch. She said she was very scared that he would harm himself again, due to officers stating he allegedly wanted them to do a murder-suicide. Lil Corey didn't seem to have much of the will to do it himself, but wouldn't mind if someone else did. His mother feared what he might do next. She started to receive phone calls from his girlfriend's mother saying she is so sorry her son is in jail. He was always sweet on the phone to her, even though she had not met him in person. She started crying to Marquita, saying if she didn't get to the city of Tyler, they would lock her son up and throw away the key. They made the mistake, and they plan to make an example out of your child for this not to happen again, she said. She stated that blacks are treated very badly down there, and they don't care about him being a child. Marquita was scared, but at the same time, still angry with her. Marquita felt she was in on her son's trip to Texas to begin with. She eventually gave her a number to a bishop spokesman, and he talked with her for several hours on the process of the Smith County judicial system being corrupt. Marquita knew that Texas was not a state you play with, but still, she thought they were taking things out of context on what they would do to her son. Again, she was being naive. He advised her to contact the detention center, and she told them that her son is not to speak to anyone or have contact with anyone about his case. Marquita told them she had retained a lawyer and gave them his name. She had already spoken to Jay and an assistant director about having a special visit when she arrived Thursday of that week. Marquita was told that would be fine. She told him that she planned to be there early, but due to traffic, she arrived close to 2 p.m. When she finally made it to the facility and asked for her visit, Marquita was told that they were not able to let them visit at this time, short on officers, and they have court. "That was not what I was told over the phone," she stated. "I have not seen my son since the incident. He is suicidal. I need to see him now," she says. Jay said that regular visits would be over around 5:30 p.m. and to come back at that time, which he did. They were told that the only people allowed to visit are his parents, but Jay stated he would make an exception for the paternal grandmother since she is part of his household. He also said they could have 1 hour to visit. Marquita asked, will he write that on a paper so if he is not available the next time they come, that they can have something to reference to? Jay declined, saying that he will let the staff know, and if they don't know, they will be able to contact him from their cell phone. He also said that Marquita needed to sign this paper, which was some type of contract about her hiring a lawyer. The letter stated that if her lawyer wasn't present on August the 9th, she would be held in contempt of court and could serve 6 months in jail. Marquita told him that she called in with the lawyer because he sounded worthwhile over the phone, but when she met with him, she wasn't sure if he was for her child. She said, "I will not sign anything without an attorney, and furthermore, you are telling me that without anyone ever telling me prior to me stating I have a lawyer, you can hold me in contempt, even though I have never stepped a foot in your courtroom." His response was yes. Visitations are non-contact, and when Marquita was able to see her child that she has only known for 16 years, with a distinguished look of innocence, with an undisclosed amount of pain behind his eyes. His arms were filled with around 15 staples where he had lacerations. Marquita broke down in tears. She had worked in places like this before, and reality came crashing down on her all at once. She never thought she would see her son in a bright orange jumpsuit with his hands shackled to his waist. Marquita spoke with her son, and he was so ignorant to the system. He said, "When will they let me go home? Can't you get me out of here? I didn't do what they said. I know you will help me." His parents stared back at him with a poker face. His father and mother told him, "Yes, of course we're going to help you." At the time, deep down inside, they couldn't even reassure themselves. He was like a small kid, waiting for his parents to rescue him. The pain Marquita was feeling in her heart was of helplessness. It was a pain like she had never felt before. She has never not been able to hold her son, comfort her son, and discipline him on her own terms. Marquita had just come to the reality that all her power had just been given to Smith County. She started to feel the guilt that she had just handed her power over to them, and they betrayed her. Her only son, she literally handed over to one of the most corrupt law enforcement agencies known in Texas. They didn't do their jobs, and to cover it up, you're making her son take the bullet on this alone. Now, his mother is hearing voices, the same voices she heard on July the 23rd. Don't call the police. Every time the police are called, something always goes wrong. Marquita is a victim, his mother and his father, regardless of what part their son played in whatever criminal activity. If the job was done correctly, then we wouldn't be at this point. The officer, a paid public servant to serve and protect, with supposed months of training, totally ignores searching little Corey's property and intentionally brings it into a secure perimeter where other children are housed. It was not a new procedure. It was a procedure that is mandatory every time you make an arrest. Marquita had an interview with the local TV station in Tyler, Texas. They wanted to know how she felt. She was very angry with the Tyler Police Department in her interview. Lil Corey's family stayed for 2 days before Marquita had to return to Missouri due to her job. She returned home searching for lawyers, juvenile lawyers, referrals on who is the best of the best in Texas, aggressive lawyers, deal-making lawyers, previous DA lawyers, lawyers not in Tyler but in Texas. Of course, they couldn't afford them. Some started the price at $20,000 and others at $10,000. Lil Corey's family spoke with the local NAACP. They stated they don't have any funds to assist, as much as they would like to. The president of the local in that area said, yeah, they treat us bad down here in Tyler, but we accept it. They referred Marquita to other agencies, all that good pep talk they give, and then you never hear from them again. It was less than 10 days before she had to make sure she had an attorney for her son. She was pressured not only to save his life, but to keep herself out of jail. Marquita was pressured so much they requested her to sign this document on 3 accounts while in Tyler. One time they interrupted her visit with her son to get her to sign it, and she still refused. She had no success finding the lawyer that she needed badly for her son's representation. Marquita eventually retained a lawyer, which was the same lawyer she called into the detention center with for the first time. Lil Corey's mother started feeling hopeless again. She couldn't afford the representation needed to help her son. Marquita knew something was wrong. This town's judicial system and one bad mistake on who represents her child can cause Lil Corey to lose his life forever. Marquita was becoming paranoid of everyone and everything. She doesn't trust lawyers in Tyler, Texas because they're all connected with the system. Not only did they not give her a reasonable amount of time to search for a lawyer, they knew they were from out of state and didn't know anyone. This will put a further strain on her decision making. By the time of Lil Corey's next court date on Monday, August the 9th, 2010, Jay tells Corey's parents to come to Tyler, Texas. He subpoenaed them with paperwork to appear in court for a certification hearing scheduled for August the 26th, 2010, to certify their child as an adult. Well, let's see. In less than 20 days of knowing Lil Corey, they have decided to certify him as an adult. This is at the request of the probation officer as well as the prosecutor. This is the same probation officer that advised Marquita that he is neutral in any cases, but has the power to make recommendations. His criteria for requesting certification of her child is due to his prior history of misuse of a credit card, and him being 17 and less than 2 months. Marquita asked, so if my son is certified, what could be the extent of his punishment as an adult versus a juvenile? He answered, up to 99 years as an adult and up to 30 years as a juvenile. Marquita's heart fell in her stomach. Now she understood what game These people were playing. He then gives her attorney 2 incident reports about her son Corey. He assured them this doesn't mean he was in any trouble. We must write down anytime a service has been offered and denied by a juvenile. Then we have to report it to the county. Marquita's lawyer tries to reassure her of this as well. This is not anything to worry about. I told him, watch what they do with those reports. Well, Jay stated it's in little Corey's best interest, as well as the public, to stay in the detention center and not be released to his parents due to the seriousness of his crime and due to him being from out of state. Now, what didn't make sense is when the prosecutors then in return asked Jay, didn't Corey already have 2 incidents in the detention center? He stated yes. On August the 4th, he refused to take a shower, and on August the 4th, he refused recreational. The prosecutor then goes further into her statement to say, would you say that Corey is following the procedures of jail? Jay in return stated no. The same guy that just told Marquita the 2 reports meant nothing 5 minutes ago was using them against her son to make it look like he was acting out against the detention center. Marquita's attorney then asked Lil Corey what he had to say in his defense. Lil Corey said, I didn't know I had to take a shower. I thought it was an option. He asked me if I wanted to take a shower right then, but I wasn't feeling good and said no. Lil Corey went on to say when he was asked if he wanted to go to rec, he assumed that meant outside, so he said yes. He then went to exit his cell, and then the officer told him that recreational for him means he will have to work out in front of his cell, and Lil Corey said, never mind. His mother is coming to the realization of what they're trying to do. They don't want to fix her child or rehabilitate his way of thinking. They want him to be destroyed and institutionalized forever. They recently changed the name of their detention center from Smith County Detention to Smith County Attention, stating detention is such a negative word. It's to deter outsiders from knowing what they're really doing to children in their courtroom. The judge made the decision that Lil Corey will remain at the detention center until further notice. Before he ended, he advised us that the next hearing will be in 10 days and both parents are required to be there. But for some strange reason, we weren't required to be there for his first hearing when they appointed him legal guardianship of an appointed attorney. Now that the parents had their own attorney and still were required to be present, with them knowing they don't live in the state, it was just another detention hearing stating that will not be releasing Lil Corey. Once again, we're back to being held in contempt of court. Tyler, Texas courts were trying to break their pockets because they knew it would cost to keep coming up there. Spending expenses regarding hotels, cars, planes, and food. Lil Corey's family had already been up there twice. It was almost $1,000 for those 2 occasions. The family believes the courts were trying to bankrupt them with constant traveling and sky-high lawyer fees. Marquita believes the courts intentionally put her family under pressure by rushing them to find legal representation, causing them not to be able to think accordingly. The police officer involved in Lil Corey's arrest was suspended for an undisclosed amount of time. The detention officer got several weeks paid leave to recover from his trauma. I won't say he is not traumatized, but how much would you play into a story of a child shot at you so you don't have to be scrutinized for not following protocol? Then to top it all off, you can be off for several weeks paid leave. The detention officer yelled over the intercom, "Kid has a gun." He never said, "Kid is shooting at me," which would be the first thing a detention officer would yell. Lil Corey sat there for 3 hours without acting out in any way in the intake area. He is allegedly standing with the detention officer, the only other person down there, by a closet. Lil Corey never gave the police officer any trouble, as she stated in her report, which would have been to his better advantage. The color of what bag the weapon came out of has changed from report to report. How Lil Corey obtained his property has changed from story to story. What Tony, the officer, yelled out has changed from report to report. To top it all off, they have a video which shows Lil Corey sitting down on a bench while an officer books him in. Then the video blinks. The bags that were showing on the counter disappear. Then again, time lapses. Lil Corey has now disappeared, but the police officer and detention officer are still in the intake area. Then finally, one final blink of the video, you see Corey in the hall walking back and forth with a weapon, and then subdued by police. What happened to the suicide attempt? What happened to shooting at the officer? When the officer kept trying to talk Lil Corey down, he reported that Lil Corey kept saying that someone had shot at him and he was scared. He was scared, and the amount of blood dripping from his arm caused him to be confused. Corey's mother now wonders what really happened in the intake area. 2 people present, and no video to show what happened, even though it is part of the recording in that same room. There wasn't a gunpowder residue test for either person, just a detention officer's word against a supposed gangster juvenile thug. The crime was contaminated and not handled properly by Smith County. Marquita noticed that Jay, the probation officer, does not call everyone by their first name, but he does the detention officer, Tony, who was supposedly assaulted. That let her know that the same man who had to make a critical decision to certify her child as an adult is not only a peer of Tony's, but a friend. Now, can he do a clear job of separating feelings with work ethics? It should be a conflict of interest. Marquita's only son is locked down 23 out of 24 hours a day, allegedly suicidal, with no family in Texas, no consistent visits, and no literature in his cell to read. She asked if her son had a Bible. Jay responded no. When she asked Jay why he didn't have a Bible, Jay said because he's on suicide watch. Marquita's son was eventually issued a Bible. They told his mother he could have a book without violence. She brought him a GED book. She figured since he can't go anywhere, it can't be easily distracted, what would be better than having him to study? Corey's mother was told by Jay they weren't sure if they could clear it, and then she was told, well, school starts next week. Eventually, Marquita never backing down, Jay finally took the book, but that would have been after he got on the stand stating her son interfered with the running of the facility. Jay knew that her son would be certified the following week and he wouldn't see the first day of school in the detention center. The constant trips to Tyler, Texas started to put a strain on Marquita's wallet, mental state of mind, and now she's in danger of losing her job due to constantly taking time off. Lil Corey kept trying to reach his lawyer the week before his certification hearing. Marquita kept trying to reach his lawyer. His father tried, the detention center, and Corey's grandmother. Finally, his secretary said the lawyer is on vacation. It had been several days before he finally answered the phone. During the time when he wasn't answering calls, Marquita decided to rush back to Tyler, Texas because her son sounded down on the phone. He was discouraged because his lawyer wasn't answering his calls. Marquita brought his cousin with her to visit Corey. After receiving harsh and unequal treatment from Jay, they were finally able to visit with her son. His demeanor was different this visit. He said we didn't have to come visit him anymore. His mouth was shaking, which his mother had never seen before. The detention officer asked Marquita to sign a waiver to have his hair cut in the detention center. I asked him if they cut hair good. He said yes, but then stated he didn't want his hair cut, which was odd to his mother. The kid loved to go to the barbershop any other day. He just kept saying it didn't matter. He never made direct eye contact with his family as they were speaking words of encouragement. It was kinda like he had blocked it out, and he went into his own world for a second. Lil Corey was being housed in a cell with Brian Truvia, the kid that stabbed and killed his special education teacher. Brian was 17 years old, but when the incident occurred, he was 16 years of age, like Corey. Also, immediately pushed through at a rapid rate to be certified as an adult. Judge Getz went ahead and pushed Brian's certification hearing through. A kid with prior mental issues, with second grade intellect, with a record of mental illness starting from age 9, and killed his special ed teacher, was certified as an adult for capital murder. Marquita's son had only been in there a week, and he told her that there was a boy that was crazy in his module. He was referring to Brian. Now, Lil Corey could clearly see this boy had issues, but the court couldn't. Brian went to adult court. The judge advised him that if he could give him the death penalty, he would. But since he can't, 99 years with no chance of parole. Brian's lawyer appealed it with the Texas Supreme Court, and Judge Getz's ruling was overturned. Now Brian is right back at the Juvenile Detention Center and will be placed in a secured mental institute. Corey said one day that his so-called psychologist came in and advised him that his father is in a gang and wanted him to answer questions about that. Then he was told that he could be going to jail for up to 99 years as an adult. He was mentally being attacked, and it was working. His mother was very upset that the alleged psychologist would alter her son's state of mind and put him in a more depressive state, knowing he was just on suicide watch. Lil Corey had no knowledge of what his psychologist was talking about when he clearly told her son that his father was an active gang member. He defended his father, saying, "He is not in a gang. I have never heard that before." He then kept questioning him more about his father, causing Corey to be very defensive. He again stated he knew nothing about his dad in a gang. Therapy session ended and he completed his report on Corey. He took third-party info and made it part of his session. The psychologist never called his dad once to ask him personally about what he had heard. What does alleged gang activity have to do with Lil Corey's psychological state? I couldn't tell you, except that it was altered after speaking with his so-called psych. The session sounded more like an investigation and questioning of a child for evidence to build more of a case against him. Big Corey has never been in a gang, does not own one tattoo, and has never been arrested for gang activity. And to top it off, he is a licensed bondsman. What they saw was alert in NCIC, which was added to his name as a juvenile when he lived in an area known for gang activity. Once again, Marquita went back home to Kansas City, scared for her son's mental well-being. She had to reflect, to notice all the sneaky underhanded things being done to make sure this boy is certified and sent to prison for a very long time. Time had passed. Several court dates have passed. Her son was certified as an adult, and bond was set at $1 million. The family will no longer have court hearings at juvenile court. After Lil Corey was certified, he was shipped off to the county jail. The court already knew they were certifying Marquita's son because the transport van was waiting for him before court even started. As they traveled back that day, they were at a stoplight on a highway. They could see another transport bus stopped at a light. Marquita couldn't help but concentrate on the number of minorities she could see being shipped off like cattle. Most of them appeared to be under the age of 20 years old. Her reality was sinking in more, that her son is now part of 20th century lynching. If you're not familiar with lynching, it was a way of controlling African Americans while protecting white privilege through the use of terrorism. Black Americans were falsely accused of any crime they could conjure up to have reasons to use their lynching technique. Well, today, it's illegal to lynch as well as to enslave, but both have been traded with today's current judicial system. The legal way to exterminate African Americans is by giving them ridiculous amounts of time, chumped up charges, police brutality, and other means of excessiveness that would never be used against the Caucasian race. Blacks are being legally lynched and buried alive for no other reason than the color of their skin. Racism should be a thing of the past, but it isn't. After Corey was certified and sent to the big boy jail, he was given unknown medication advised by therapists due to his mental state. His parents had no more information or control of their son's life, not his schooling, his health, his environment, or anything pertaining to him. He was considered an adult by law. Little Corey didn't even know what meds he was taking, but his mother knew he seemed to be in a state of psychosis. His mouth still had a twitch. He seemed to slow down his speaking. No real eye contact with his family or concerns with his surroundings or himself. Corey's mother had worked as a correctional officer before, and he was showing signs of disconnect from the world. She started to think of all the scenarios of what could possibly be happening to her child in that place, but she couldn't fix her mouth to ask him. He was showing signs that had been introduced to Marquita from previous work experience. Had he been possibly physically, mentally, or sexually abused in his module? He wasn't your ordinary so-called thug, as Smith County had on paper. He was a child, last seen playing Mario Brothers on Nintendo to help his little sister Courtney to the next level. He was never hanging on corners and going out to parties. He loved movies, basketball, drawing, and magic. He was an introvert, but when he was comfortable with you, he became an extrovert. He was unique. He could be sarcastic at times and defiant, but what teenager isn't? Marquita discovered that her son was starting to unravel at around 15 and a half after a traumatic experience. Lil Corey had no street knowledge nor credibility. This was both good and bad for him in jail. He had to learn very quickly real life situations in jail. Who to talk to and who not to talk to. How to stay alive and not to get caught up in any more drama. Lil Corey wasn't from the area he was incarcerated in, so he had no family or friends he could confide in. As I tell this story, it gets very crazy, almost unbelievable that it's nonfiction. Remember, Lil Corey's girlfriend that he was going to see that lived in Tyler, Texas, his parents used to come pick her up to go to court dates with them. Marquita couldn't stay mad at her anymore, and she thought it would make her son happy to be able to see her there. One day they were going home to Kansas City, and she asked to go back with them because her birth mom was always fighting with her in Texas. One day, Corey's parents went to pick her up. The mother's boyfriend and mom were physically fighting this little girl. Corey's family took her back with them to Kansas City, to her aunt and uncle who was originally taking care of her in KC. At that time, it seemed like the right thing to do. Corey's girlfriend ends up getting into it with her uncle and aunt, and she ends up living with Corey's family. Why not, Marquita thought. She already had her mom and aunt living with her. As court dates continued back and forth to Texas, Corey's parents went. Marquita ended up getting pregnant. Yes, pregnant. At 34 years old. She had 2 children already, 1 boy and 1 girl, Corey, who was 16 at the time, and Courtney, who was 11 years old. She thought it was a really perfect even number and a great age difference for her 2 kids. She never in her wildest dreams thought she'd have any more children, especially with what she was going through with her firstborn child. Even more crazy is that Marquita and the father of her children had not been together sexually in years. They lived in different homes as well. I guess the pain, guilt, and loneliness they felt caused the emotional as well as sexual connection temporarily. Corey's parents didn't get along, but deep down, they still had feelings for each other. It's hard to explain. To top it all off, history repeated itself. Marquita got into a big argument with Corey right before she found out the wonderful news that she was 6 weeks pregnant. Big Corey never forgave Marquita for calling the police, so he held a strong hate for Marquita. He had a strong dislike for Corey's girlfriend too. He would say, "I told him not to mess with that little girl." They didn't speak for a while after the argument. Then Marquita tried to tell him about her pregnancy. At first he said Marquita was lying. Then she sent him the ultrasound, but he never responded. Marquita completely stopped contacting him, and it turned into a big old mess. Now, instead of them being united as one for their son, they were driving separately to Texas to see little Corey. Big Corey was on one side of the courtroom, and Marquita would be on another with no acknowledgement to one another. They were a circus, and unfortunately, their child took the biggest loss for it. Whatever part of the family that was left was now destroyed. The pregnancy was a very hard decision Marquita was left with. She had so many questions running through her mind. Should I keep it? Is this a test from God? If I can get rid of the life of this child so easily, then why would God give me back my son's life? I must have this baby, or I will never get my son back, she said. Why, after all these years, did she end up pregnant with another child by the same man? Is he replacing little Corey with this new child? She told herself she wasn't a good parent. She said she can't raise any more kids. Her family knew she was in pain, but they couldn't see how deep the wounds had been cut in her heart. Marquita wasn't sleeping at night and would often daydream at work. She had no patience and was very hostile towards everyone. She felt wronged by the world. and wasn't ever ready for what was coming next. Marquita eventually had another ultrasound and found out she was having a girl. Her daughter Courtney was excited, but Marquita wasn't. She started to ask herself questions again. Why did he give me a girl? Does that mean I'm going to get my son back? Or does that mean he knows I'm not capable of raising a boy? She asked. Marquita could not get her mind to stop racing and overthinking every movement. She was paranoid of everyone and everything. She found a conspiracy in anything. It took a year and some months to finally go to court for Lil Corey's trial. It was a highly publicized case in their town, so the media was present. Alvin Sykes, NAACP, and others were at the trial.
17-year-old Corey Webb will stand trial August 1st. He's accused of taking a gun into the Smith County Juvenile Detention Center.
Webb, who is from Kansas City, was picked up at the Tyler bus station and taken to the detention center back in July of last year. Now, once he was there, authorities say Webb pulled a gun from his backpack and fired a shot, allegedly at an officer. New tonight, KLTV7's Samantha Jordan obtained video of the incident and spoke with Webb's family, who are making some accusations of their own.
This is Corey Webb's mugshot, but his father says this is not his son.
He was a kid that used to be on the honor roll, straight A student. He's not a street kid. He would always stay in the home. He played video games, participated in sports like baseball and boxing.
Webb's father says his son's behavior in Tyler was the result of a death in the family. He claims his son spiraled out of control, getting in trouble at home in Missouri and eventually running away, running to Tyler where officers were waiting. Corey's mother's the one who called police after she realized her son was gone.
There was an incident involving a shooting and my son and an officer over there at the facility.
But the Webb family says what juvenile detention officials claim and what surveillance video shows don't match.
Pictures are jumping around. Nothing's in sequence. This thing was jumping around. And from my naked eye, I knew that someone had tampered with the evidence.
District Attorney Matt Bingham says his office had a computer forensics expert look at the video. Bingham says the expert said they didn't believe the video had been tampered with. But the family says they still hope they can take their son home when the trial is over.
Praying and hoping for the best in his favor, that they will give him a chance to, grow up to be a man, because they've taken a year of the young man's life already.
In Tyler, Samantha Jordan, KLTV 7 News.
Smith County DA Matt Bingham told us because of the circumstances of the offense and because of Webb's history, he was certified to stand trial as an adult. He could now face between 5 years and life in prison.
The day the trial started, the parents were not coached by his attorney on what would or would not occur. Everyone in Lil Corey's family wanted to testify as a witness. So with that occurring, his parents and grandmother were not allowed in the courtroom until time to speak. During the trial, only his little sister Courtney and cousin Dominique were in the courtroom watching. Partly through the trial, the prosecutors requested the bailiff to testify, stating he saw Corey smiling in the courtroom, which was a true statement. When he looked back at his little sister, Corey's mother stated that she felt this was a very odd request from the courts. After working as a detention officer herself, she has never been requested on stand when she transported inmates because one smiled in court. Corey went through 3 paid attorneys before they actually ended up with a court-appointed one. In the trial, the court-appointed attorney tells Corey they're going to arrest your daddy for signing notary paperwork illegally acting as you. Corey immediately tells the bailiff he has to use the restroom, trying to get a recess so they will walk him in the hallway so he can tell his father. The bailiff response to Corey was, "I don't care. Pee in the trash." Corey thinks about what the bailiff stated, and he does just that, wanting to stop the court to get to the hallway to his dad. All Corey did was upset the judge and give the news outlets more content to run negative news stories about him. Corey sat there and listened to about 5 witnesses make him out to be the worst person ever. Again, the attorney was never in his ear telling him that this is the process. Mind you, again, he is still only a child, and comprehension of what's going on is beyond him. Corey stands up and states he is guilty, and the judge asked him, did he understand? Lil Corey said in a response, "It don't matter. Y'all believe them over me anyway." Court took a short recess, and the family learned in the hallway that Corey pled guilty by his little sister and cousin coming out crying, saying he just gave up and said he was guilty. Court returned, and the family was allowed back in for sentencing. The prosecutors requested 99 years. In the end, Corey Webb was sentenced to 50 years with no prior record at 17 years old. His father never moved, and his mother dropped her head down as tears rolled down her cheeks. His little sister and cousin also cried quietly. Lil Corey's 70-year-old grandmother at the time weeping loudly, very heartbroken at the outcome. The bailiff came and told her he would physically put her out if she didn't stop all that screaming and crying. Most of the prosecutors that work Corey's case have mainly made examples of minority minors versus their white counterparts. The majority of white minors never see adult prison and are sent to juvenile detention instead. Going forward, Lil Corey has graduated high school in the penitentiary. He is trying to take college courses because you have to wait 10 years to become eligible. Lil Corey has helped other inmates with their legal paperwork, often plays chess with elders, works out, and spends most of his time in the legal law library when allowed. A petition was created on behalf of him, and he received at least 1,000 signatures that felt Lil Corey's 50-year sentence was cruel. Corey has written several writs himself, but all declined. Legal attorneys agree that Corey's intellect is right up there as an attorney himself. Corey will be 30 years old this year and still currently fighting for his life. He also hired new legal representation. He holds accountability for his actions and definitely understands that now that he's a full adult. Corey just can't wrap his mind around the cruel punishment of 50 years, not eligible for parole until 25 years completed. As years have passed, so many different convictions of people doing more serious crimes get less time than him. Corey's parents and grandmother have written so many people trying to get someone to advocate or help by exposing this horrific story. Everyone can see the horrific events that unfold with police brutality. But behind the scenes, people forget that the legal system is herding up minorities like cattle and giving them lengthy sentences. I'm out of here.